Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, because this will help me out in growing the channel and being able to produce more videos like this one. This episode will guide you through the issues of Uncanny X-Men published in 1982. Issue 156. As seen at the end of the previous issue, Colossus is lying on the ground after being pierced by one of Deathbird's javelins. He's being surrounded by his fellow X-Men, Corsair of the Starjammers and Tigra of the Avengers. The police had just arrived to put the X-Men under arrest for the damage to the city, which had been caused by their battle with Deathbird and the BROOD. Tigra is recapping what had happened in her mind, and, as an Avenger, wonders how she would explain this to the police. The police are giving her a hard time. We then switch over to the FAA Air Traffic Control Center, where once again a UFO is spotted on the radars, much like a couple of days before. They try and make sure that every commercial airplane is moving out of the area, because the UFO that materializes is apparently huge. The spaceship fires a beam, thought to be some kind of death ray, straight at the X-Men and Corsair, who disappear, leaving Tigra behind. Once the X-Men materialize aboard the ship, they find out it belongs to the Starjammers, Corsair's band of pirates who apparently had escaped from the Shi'ar Imperial Army after Corsair had left them behind. Cyclops mentions how Colossus is still on the verge of death and asks if Corsair's crew can help them. Corsair says that they will try and that it's up to Colossus, being hooked up to a life support module and their medic, a flying robot named Sikorsky. Sikorsky does a quick scan and finds that Colossus is severely hurt and his life is at risk. Scott says that he won't allow Colossus to die, and Corsair asks him whether he's God and that he has stood over bodies and friends before, so he knows how it feels to be powerless and can only hope and pray Colossus makes it. We then catch up with Kitty and Kurt, who are still being held captive by the Shi'ar as hostages, while the X-Men try and find Lilandra within 24 hours. Kitty is still enjoying the costume-making device aboard the ship. The Shi'ar guard mentions how they have been behaving as model prisoners. No problems at all, apart from Kitty's constant talking. Suddenly a hologram pops up. It's Admiral Lord Samadar, asking the two X-Men whether the accommodations are satisfactory. Kurt confirms this and asks what the reason for the call is. Samadar gives an update on what's going on Earth and shows images of the battle with Deathbird, but also of Colossus being attacked by acid first and then stabbed through his chest. Kitty thinks to herself how it's all been very much to Samadar's liking that the X-Men had been in a rough battle with Deathbird, but also likes to show Colossus being hurt badly and the effect it has on Kitty and Kurt. She's not wrong in thinking that, because we see Samadar in a call with Deathbird, discussing their deal, hindering the X-Men from being successful in liberating Lilandra and thus destroying the Earth for revenge, and that if Chancellor Araki or any of the Imperial Guard disprove that, they will be dealt with. Samadar also tells Deathbird that she has only been partially successful in hindering the X-Men, since they've now joined forces with the Starjammers. Deathbird mentions that Samadar has been paid royally and she expects value for money. Apparently Charles has been drugged and he's having some sort of fever dream. While he's waking up from his nightmare, his mind is making up distorted images of an alien figure resembling the BROOD, slowly changing into the face of the woman he loves. At this moment we find out that not only Professor X, but also his lover, the majestic Lilandra, are aboard Deathbird's ship, which is making its way through space. Charles voices his doubts whether it's really Lilandra, and she confirms she is. Charles scans her mind and cannot find any trace of any alien psychic anomaly. They talk about the dangers Deathbird poses, and Lilandra's influence in Charles' life, and the loss of two students, namely Jean Grey the Phoenix earlier, and now Colossus. While they are exchanging words on how they would not have missed their time together regardless of the losses that came with it, they get interrupted by Deathbird, who offers Lilandra, her sister, freedom in exchange for the throne of the Shi'ar Empire. Lilandra attacks Deathbird, but Deathbird easily deals with her. Charles asks how Deathbird is related to Lilandra and the Shi'ar, and Lilandra explains how Deathbird was the firstborn and rightful heir to the throne until she was stripped from her rank due to a crime she committed. While Lilandra is alive, Deathbird cannot become the Empress. We then switch to Cyclops and Corsair looking out on the vastness of space, aboard the Starjammer. Scott informs on the status of both Colossus in the sickbay and Deathbird's trace. Corsair tells Scott that Colossus is still not doing well, and it's only a matter of time before they catch up to Deathbird's spacecraft. Corsair tells Scott that he heard about the loss of Jean from Storm. Scott tells him how he felt lost and alone, like his heart and soul were ripped out of him, to which Corsair responds that all things will pass in time, even grief. Scott then asks Corsair what had happened when he was young and got split up with his brother from his mom and dad. Corsair retells the story of being attacked by a UFO, how he told his wife Catherine Ann to save both kids with but a single parachute, and how they got abducted by the Shi'ar. The Shi'ar abducted them for both study and pleasure. Corsair was separated from his wife and sent to the slave pens, which he eventually escaped. He then set out to find Anne, who had been taken in by the then Shi'ar Emperor Decan as a sex slave. Corsair found them, and instead of shooting him, he tried to take out Decan with his bare hands, a mistake he still regrets. Guards came to Decan's rescue, and Corsair was once again captured and about to be executed on the spot. Decan puts a halt to his execution because he wants Corsair, a barbarian in his eyes, to suffer by stabbing Catherine Ann right there in front of Corsair's eyes. After that, Corsair gets sent to the Star Pits, where he met Chode, Raza and Mamselle Hepzibah, with whom he became friends and eventually stole the Starjammer to escape from Shi'ar enslavement, and had been fighting with them ever since. Scott thanks his dad for sharing the story. They seem to be growing closer. At that moment, they get informed by Hepzibah that they are closing in on Deathbird's ship. Surprised by the fact that Deathbird's ship doesn't try to escape, they find out why, as suddenly a massive craft appears, seemingly out of nowhere. This huge spacecraft envelops both the Starjammer as Deathbird's ship, and docking cradles form from out of the interior walls, to allow a cadre of BROOD troopers to seize the Starjammer and its passengers. To their surprise, the airlock blows off. Colossus apparently recovered and slammed the airlock right off, smashing some of the BROOD. Wolverine, Colossus and Raza charge out of the ship as a first line of attack, followed by Storm, Hepzibah and Chode. It becomes clear that Storm, even though she senses evil all around her, is motivated to not kill the BROOD, since she pledged to never take a life. The Starjammers do not share this concern, and Raza tells Storm to stand aside if she cannot kill the enemy. Storm conjures up a blizzard inside the alien vessel, and it seems to respond to it as if in pain. The BROOD counter the attack by initiating a zero-gravity environment, making it harder for the X-Men and Starjammers to stand their ground and become easier targets. The BROOD aim to use both teams as hosts for the Mother Queen. Raza hands Colossus grip soles, which allow him to adhere to any surface. Colossus thanks him and mentions Cyclops and Corsair's mission. We then switch to Professor Xavier and Empress Lilandra's holding cell, which is being opened by several BROOD with ray guns who are about to incinerate the both of them. Luckily for them, they are being rescued by the time by Cyclops and Corsair. Professor X, paralyzed, but taking the advantage of the zero-gravity field, launches himself towards the two and tells them to get down, as more BROOD were attacking from behind. Scott is telling Xavier to be more careful, but Charles had his reason to jump out of his holding cell because he wanted to escape from the inhibitor field, dampening his mental powers. But he also felt the urge to act, since the BROOD had been threatening his and Lilandra's life. While they move on, they get joined by the others. They wonder about the architectural structure of the ship, and Professor X expresses his relief to see Colossus alive. We then switch over to Storm, who is in battle with Deathbird. Deathbird asks Storm why she's even defending or trying to rescue Lilandra, since Lilandra is directly responsible for the execution of Storm's good friend the Phoenix, and she says that they should be allies rather than enemies. Storm declines Deathbird's threat to join her or die, since no matter what she thinks of Lilandra, Deathbird is much worse. During their fight, one of Deathbird's javelins is stuck in the vessel's walls, and Storm notices how there's a liquid oozing from the walls. She finds out it's actually blood and concludes that the vessel is not just a manner of transportation, but actually a living being. With Storm being distracted, Deathbird push-kicks Storm and tells one of her BROOD henchmen to open a portal in the wall. With Storm adrift in outer space, the Starjammers and the rest of the X-Men analyze the situation, and Waldo concludes she'll die if she's not rescued within 30 seconds. They start up the Starjammer and blast through the alien vessel's walls. They rescue Storm in time, and when Storm recovers, She's relieved to see Cyclops' plan to liberate Charles and Lilandra worked well. She tells everyone that she found out the vessel is a living creature and may have been hurt severely in the process. Charles wonders if the vessel is an ally or a slave to the Brood. Waldo chimes in by saying he's not registering any higher order brain functions, consciousness or self-awareness, and has presumably been deliberately destroyed. The balance is made up regarding the repairs needed to the Starjammer to be able to return to Earth. And it turns out repair work will need about 24 hours. Conclusions are that will not be enough, since there's only less than 6 hours left, before Chancellor Araki's deadline will have run out. Thanks for watching.